Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com with this week's episode of Market Monday. This week I want to talk about the standard metagame post-ban. How I think this is a rock, paper, scissors, cockroach, and bomb format. If everyone's familiar with kind of the rock, paper, scissors format, the aggro mid-range control, that is usually what we consider a healthy metagame, is when all three of those archetypes are represented. I think this one's even better. And this is going above and beyond expectations. Of course, we haven't seen a Pro Tour yet, and we haven't seen a lot of information, but at least out of week one, this has been the best week one by far in a long time without any deck dominating the format. So we have a Star City Open going on right now with Mardu Vehicles being the #1 deck as far as represented, and then Black Green Delirium being close behind. So people are kind of gravitating to what is familiar, which is okay. You expect that out of week one. We still have some very powerful strategies and very powerful cards. And we're going to look for some silver lining in a lot of these strategies and see if there's any investment opportunities for particular cards. So I'm going to start with Rock. What I'm going to call Rock in this particular metagame is going to be Gideon Ally for Zendikar decks. So these kind of fit in a bunch of different categories. You have the Mardu Vehicles, which runs Gideon. You also have the old school green-white tokens. When Avacyn came out with Shadows for Innistrad, the green-white tokens deck, I think, took second at Pro Tour Shadows of Innistrad. Correct me if I'm wrong there. And then they became very popular decks for a while after that, and those have completely come back. You still have Avacyn, you still have Gideon, you still have Sylvan Advocate and Oath of Nissa. You still have a lot of those key pieces that made the green-white planeswalkers or green-white tokens strategy viable. These are kind of the mid-range Gideon decks that I like to call Rock. The problem with investing in any of these is a lot of the key pieces, if you're looking at green-white with Avacyn and Gideon and Nissa, most of those cards are going to be rotating. So there's not a lot of opportunity to invest in them. I don't like to invest in cards that right about this point after this Pro Tour is when the majority of vendors are going to start selling off their entire stock just in anticipation for rotation, because it takes that amount of time to get out of the format before rotation. So Rock, I don't think, is something you should invest in, and especially since a lot of those are pretty much already people that played Mardu Vehicles in the past. It doesn't take a lot to kind of morph over back to the green-white tokens or the black-white versions of the deck. So of course Rock is countered by Paper. So Paper I am going to call Aetherworks Marvel, and I'm going to say Prized Amalgam decks. So the Prized Amalgam and the Aetherworks Marvel decks are pretty good at beating up the mid-range decks, because the mid-range decks just can't push through quick enough before a Aetherworks Marvel type deck can just go off with Ulamog. So Marvel still does have Ulamog, it still does have some other high-value cards. Now, Mardu, especially with Unlicensed Disintegration, theoretically can push through, but my experience with like the Whirler Virtuosos and the Rogue Refiners is Mardu Vehicles is one of the easier matchups with the Aetherworks Marvel. So there again isn't a lot of potential investments, just because everything is still pretty low from this deck being a very, very popular deck and people already having the pieces. However, I do think there is some opportunity with this particular these particular decks for some price increases. So the first one is just the Rogue Refiner and the Whirler Virtuoso. If Thraben Inspector is any sort of indication of how cards can go up, and a common was able to reach 85 cents, uncommons like Silk Wrap and Grasp of Darkness, those have a lot of potential of going up. So getting into Rogue Refiner at $0.25 a piece, or Whirler Virtuosos at $0.25 a piece, can seem like you could get a potential price increase. The problem with investing in cards like this is it's hard to kind of not get killed by the fees on either TCG or eBay. So you'd have to have a good outlet as far as trade fodder if you're looking just to find players, new players that get into the format in subsequent sets that do want to run energy type decks, Aetherworks Marvel type decks. This would be the time you find those particular players and trade for the cards out of the latest set. Like, I've made kind of a living off of investing in cards when they're their lowest and then trading them at their highest after the next set comes out. And so these aren't going to be drafted anymore, and you're going to actually start to see demand outstretch the supply, and these decks will start to go up. I would not really touch Ulamog, even though Ulamog is a little bit, it's pretty inexpensive at $15 a piece, because I think Ulamog is going to be great long term. Commander players love the card, casual players love the card. Just look at the old school Ulamog or old school Emrakul hitting at like $45 price tags, and you can see just how high the ceiling can go for these type of casual cards. Attune with Aether is another card in this that could be the next Thraben Inspector. That's another 75-cent common. It is still, you can still find these in bulk bins and just pick them up out of people's draft trash. That is a card I would be starting to stockpile, because it's going to be one of those cards, just particular here at the store, how many play sets of Thraben Inspectors I've been able to sell at 75 cents a piece. Is just, we've gone through tons of them, and when it was being drafted, people were just like leaving them around, and these are the type of cards that's just what I consider free money. So Attune, Whirler Virtuoso, Rogue Refiner, and Harness Lightning is at its all-time low. That was a card that came out of the gates at over $2 a piece, and is now down to about $1, $1.15 for the Harness Lightning. Now the kind of the flagship of the deck is Aetherworks Marvel. Aetherworks Marvel is down to almost $4 a piece, which is just incredibly low for what I would say is going to be a pivotal piece of this metagame. It's going to be a tier 1 strategy in this metagame, because it does do very well against those the Gideons, the mid-range type decks. So I think Aetherworks Marvel is smart to invest in, other than I could foresee this being the next card banned in Standard if we do get another card to go across Ulamog, because I think Nicol Bolas might be very, very powerful with Aetherworks Marvel, because unlike Ulamog, I think it's going to be something that's going to be something you can cast. Probably, like, Nicol Bolas is obsessed with number 7, so I'm pretty sure the Nicol Bolas is going to cost 7, which is perfect off of a Chandra, so Chandra turn 4, or even turn 3 off of a Servant to the Conduit, and then, so then turn 5, you can have 5 lands, take up the Chandra, and just hard cast the Nicol Bolas. So I think with Nicol Bolas and Aetherworks Marvel, this could actually be a thing. So I'd keep an eye on Aetherworks Marvel. I think it's a great investment opportunity, and it does see play in commander decks and casual decks, and it is a tier 1 strategy, and it's just insanely low for a mythic in basically a archetype that's existed since it's been printed. It's been the #1 deck at times. So not really a lot from the red-blue Eldrazi, which I'd also consider to be a paper strategy. Most of those cards are going to be rotating, like the Elder Deep Fiend, like the Kozilek's Return, the Prized Amalgam, all of those type of cards. That seems to be more of a Shadows over Innistrad and Battle for Zendikar strategy, so it doesn't have enough time, in my opinion. I mean, it could spike up if it does get a Pro Tour finish, but if you are going to be investing in those, you need to invest in them right on day 1 of the Pro Tour and sell on day 2 of the Pro Tour. So it's kind of tough to do so, and to me it's just too much of a gamble. So of course the counter to the paper strategy would be Scissors. And in this case, I think the best Scissors type strategy is going to be the green-black Delirium decks. They have access to cards like Dispossess and Lay Bare and even Transgress the Mind, Pick the Brain, even have Manglehorn and the Distended Mindbender that are all pretty good at establishing a threat versus the Marvel decks and then protecting that threat. So I think that these decks are going to really capitalize on the Marvel type strategies, the decks that beat the mid-range, but they do tend to succumb to the Gideon decks. I think Gideon decks just go over the top. They do have game with each other, but I think in the long term, the Rock does beat the Scissors, and in this case, it's going to be these aggro decks that try to utilize some sort of disruption, because it's hard to really keep pace with Gideon and Archangel Avacyn. You do have cards like Grasp of Darkness and Fatal Push, but in the long term, you really do have to establish the kind of the Winding Constrictor if you're going to go that route, and the Rishkar combination to really go over the top of the Gideon decks. But these are going to be better at establishing those really solid threats, and then access to black to be able to rip out the Aetherworks Marvels or rip out the specific combo pieces to these mid-range killers, Marvels, and Prized Amalgam decks. So again, this is another deck that probably doesn't have a lot of room to invest in, because this is an established archetype. The Walking Ballista is still pretty much overpriced, in my opinion, around $12 a piece. It could start going back up because it's not going to be drafted any longer, but that's a rare. So rare at this price tag. If you actually look at the Star City Open, though, it is the most played card, which is Walking Ballista, which is a 4 of in a lot of the Gideon decks, as well as a 4 of in most of the green and black decks. So it could have some opportunity, although I don't particularly like to invest in rares that are over $5. I think they're just too volatile. Even though this one's seeing play in Modern, it's seeing play in a lot of casual decks, it's still just too rich for my blood to really invest in Walking Ballista. Rishkar seems a little bit, I think Rishkar seems to be right on par, around $2.50 to $3 a piece. And Tireless Tracker, I think, is too high, though, at $8. I don't expect Tireless Tracker to go much above that because people are going to start ditching those Tireless Trackers just in anticipation of the rotation. We'll have to wait and see how these decks evolve, but most of these, this is another established from the last format that I don't think there's going to be too many cards that have the ability to go up very much more in the as far as prices are concerned. Alright, so then we go on to what I like to call bomb in the rock, paper, scissors format. And the bomb of all bomb that just destroys all three of these archetypes is the Blue Hulk decks, the Torrential Gear Hulk decks. Now, I just played a league where I faced 4 different flavors of Torrential Gear Hulk, and in all of them, the Torrential Gear Hulk was pretty much the only win condition in the deck. So anyway, out of the 2 leagues that I played, 8 of them were Torrential Gear Hulk decks, and I only had 2 non-Torrential Gear Hulks for the first 2 league decks that I played, and they were all very, very good. They shared a common kind of package with Censor, Torrential Gear Hulk, and Glimmer of Genius. So all of them, you try to get card advantage off Glimmer of Genius. Some were running Glimmer. They were running the new common that has Cycling, instant speed, draw 2 for 4 mana, which is pretty sweet in this type of deck too, because you can draw a card and just replace it and have a card in your graveyard for Torrential Gear Hulk. But I think that Glimmer is just superior at the moment because it does add that 2 energy. So if you're in anything that utilizes 2 energy, and it also does scry, that's a little bit better. So that I like to call bomb because it's really good. Black-Green Constrictor does have a little bit of game if they start to run Dispossess, because Dispossess can just get rid of the Torrential Gear Hulks, but they still have to rely on Dispossess actually hitting, which against a Censor type deck and a lot of the other counter spells, those type of cards I don't think are going to, if they're smart, they will just always keep up that mana to counter those specific decks. And the later this deck goes, the better it is because of once they establish 4 or 5 mana, they can start using the Glimmers at end of turn instant speed and then just not worry about any threats coming out. All of those is just a great plan versus both mid-range, combo, and these sort of, what'd you call it, black-green rock attrition type strategies. So Torrential Gear Hulk I do think is poised for a huge price increase. I got in at $13.75. I bought a playset. I wasn't going to invest too much in a card, as I just bought a vending computer, don't have a lot of money just to throw around at investments. So, but I do think Torrential Gear Hulk is a very smart investment. I'm looking at it now. eBay, it looks like most of them are $15 a piece. It's actually creeping up to about 4 for $70 now. And you can still find some at TCG around the $13 to $14 mark, but the most, if you want to invest in multiples of these, usually around the $15. So the sky is the limit for this card. I could easily see this being the $22, $23, $24, $25 mark if the Torrential Gear Hulk deck does very well at the Pro Tour. If not, I think that it still is going to be one of those decks. It's a great deck to run. The biggest drawback I would say to the Torrential Gear Hulk decks, especially at a large tournament, is you're going to draw a ton of matches, because this just seems like the most miserable mirror match to play when both of your only win cons are going to be each other's Torrential Gear Hulks. You know, that's, so you just need to keep those down. That just seems miserable to me. So I don't know. That could keep a lot of people from playing it at these larger tournaments when they find out that they're going to be statistically eliminated if they get too many draws, not even losses. And I particularly hate playing against the Torrential Gear Hulk deck, but right now, looking over the metagame, it is insanely solid. The Prize Amalgam decks do decent versus this type of strategy, but Engulf the Shore is pretty good against these type of decks. The Fevered Visions can be a problem, but the white, that's where it's the flavor of the Torrential Gearhulk. You can kind of combat these type of strategies. So I don't know. That was kind of a huge signal to me that Torrential Gearhulks are going to be here to stay. After the first 8-man tournament had a bunch in it, and then the subsequent dailies after those have had Torrential Gearhulks in the 5-0 finishes. We'll have to wait and see. I'm actually recording this Sunday, so the Star City Open isn't quite done at the moment. So that gets us on to Cockroach. And Cockroach I like to call the all-out aggro strategies. Now the thing about, so Bomb beats everything but loses to Cockroach. So Cockroach is the opposite. Cockroach loses to everything but beats Bomb. So it's kind of the nuclear bomb, only the cockroaches survive. So anyway, Cockroach is the all-in aggro strategies. These tend to do very well against Torrential Gearhulk. So we're talking about humans, zombies, red deck wins, red-green energy, black aggro. All of these I think are very, very good at going underneath Torrential Gearhulk, getting that threat established before the sensor can start countering things. And then if they are the black or the red version of Torrential Gearhulk, they'll have some game, but they're still proactively having to remove cards, allowing you to then cast more cards. So really liking the Relentless Dead zombie combos. Relentless Dead is spiked up to $18, for example. There are mono black lists, there are red black lists, there are white black zombies lists. All of them tend to do very well against Torrential Gearhulk. The old school red black aggro using the artifact strategy tends to do very well against Torrential Gearhulk. The humans decks are doing good against Torrential Gearhulks. The red-green energy, either electrostatic pummeler or just the good old school voltaic brawler bristling, the bristling hydra are also doing very good against Torrential Gearhulk. So red-green energy I think has the most play against the rest of the format. The thing is, mostly those lose to everything else. Red-green energy does not have a favorable matchup versus black-green constrictor. It doesn't have a favorable matchup versus Mardu. Doesn't have a favorable matchup versus even green-white, as all those clog the boards up very, very well. They can do good against Marvel, but if it's the Marvel energy a lot of times clogs the boards with Whirler Virtuosos and Rogue Refiners and serving the conduits, and then you get comboed off with Aetherworks Marvel before you can push through. They usually do have a very good plan against these all-in aggro strategies. They do particularly bad against the Prized Amalgam combo decks, as the sweepers of the Kozilek's Return is just going to be too much for these Cockroach all-in aggro strategies. So I do like red-green energy though, because if you see Bristling Hydra is down to like $1 in places, and it's just a very, very powerful card. I think that if you get the Serpopard, and I think one of the key cards that people haven't been running in the red-green energy is going to be the Bloodlust Insider, because the Bloodlust Insider in turn 1 allows for attacking in for 4 with a Voltaic Brawler, followed up by a turn 3 that can give another thing haste and attacking for an insane amount. Your Long Tusk Cubs also get haste, which is really, really good for that card. So I think that it's going to be a matter of time before they adopt the Bloodlust Insider. But the key pieces are all there. Ronus tends to do very well with these type of strategies. Gives him a 3-drop that can then attack in, be an indestructible target that can pump up your next cards. So these are going to keep the Torrential Gearhulk decks in check, and it makes for a very, very interesting format, as you never know what to play. Like, if everyone's on Torrential Gearhulk, you can go underneath them with these type of cards. So let's just take a look of some of those decks that are what I like to call the Cockroach decks. So first of all, the Black-Red. The Black-Red is still running good old Scrapheap Scrounger. Scrapheap Scrounger is very low at the moment. Magma Sprays are keeping Scrapheap Scrounger in check. But I think that once people, if we really go into this green-white format, there won't be a point for Magma Sprays. Maybe in the sideboard, but a lot of people are going to kind of not play them as much anymore, and that just leads for the Scrapheap Scrounger. The Blood Rage Brawler as a 4/3 to just ditch a Fiery Temper or Scrapheap Scrounger, or even these Alms of the Vein. Dread Wanderer comes back. The Beaumont Couriers are quick if you go into the Heart of Quran, and just kind of the old school red-black. All those is established threat after threat after threat, and it's very, very good. So Unlicensed Disintegration still seems interesting to me. It's not nearly as good as it was now that Saheeli is out of the format, but I still think that Unlicensed Disintegration is great at killing off like Chandras and Gideons, or at least putting them down in a reasonable range to killing off, so you can kill off a Heart of Quran and redirect a ton of damage to a Planeswalker. You can still... with Mardu and Lysis Disintegration is one of the best cards to have any game versus like green-white or the green-black Constrictor. It's one of the best cards to have. And even against Aetherworks Marvel, it's the best way to clear like a Rogue Refiner and still do some damage. So I like Unlicensed Disintegration, about 30 cents a piece. You can still find them. I think it's one of the best cards in Standard. The red-green energy, I wouldn't be opposed to investing in any of those cards, whether it be the Bristling Hydra, whether it be the Voltaic Brawlers and the Long Tusk Cubs, or even some of the Electrostatic Pummeler type cards. I think that those are going to stick around. And it makes for a very, very exciting format for this rock, paper, scissors, cockroach bomb format. So I think if I were going to give my picks of what I invest in right now, I like the Aetherworks Marvel as a pickup at around $4, $3.50, $4 a piece. The only downside of that is if it happens to get banned, but with Nicol Bulls on the horizon, I don't see it going anywhere. I think it's going to be a very, very powerful deck to combat the Gideon base decks. People are still going to play it. The combo players that just got out of Saheeli are going to be looking for a combo deck, and I think the Marvel's the best position one. So that's really my pick for the week for card that I would invest in. It's not going to be open any longer. It's one of the most powerful cards ever printed in a Standard set. It has seen play since its inception, since its printing. I think that we've missed the mark on a few other of the... I told you to invest in zombies. All of those have gone up quite a bit. If they don't prove themselves very, very quickly, I would get out of Relentless Dead as soon as possible. So that is my sell card for the week, is Relentless Dead. If you have them, you just collect. If you invested in it at $8, if even less than $8, you've made your money, and collect right now and get out of the card unless you need it for a deck. Same thing goes with Crypt Breaker. Could go up a little bit more, as it's starting to see a little bit of play in a few modern decks here and there as well. But I think that that's something you can pick up after rotation for probably bulk rare price. And all of those cards, I think, are the time to get out of them and just trade into the cards from Kaladesh and Aether Revolt that have the biggest chance to go up. Torrential Gearhulk would be my other pick for investments if you can get in under $16. This is the card that I think can go up the most, up to around the $25 to $30 mark, as usually the Torrential Gearhulk decks it sees play in 4 of, and then it sees play in a ton of other decks as 1 of or 2 ofs or 3 ofs that aren't necessarily just Torrential Gearhulk decks. We haven't seen a Dynavolt Tower deck in a while too, which I do think could also come back. Once again, that deals with a lot of the energy type cards, the Aether Hubs, the Glimmers, those type of cards all have a lot of potential of going up. So keep your eye on this week for cards for potential Pro Tour. I will be trying to do the same, and if you are part of my Patreon, I give market alerts on Patreon. Did do a market alert for cards in the past like the Restore Balance and now the Torrential Gearhulk, and even did it for some of the other cards that did go up in value. So if that's a way for you to get real-time market alerts, is just joining the Patreon. Anyone of any tier is eligible to see those posts. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this Market Monday video. This has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.